Hello everybody and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and today we're going to head to Kings Island for yet another roller coaster review. This time it's for the park's Giga coaster, Orion. Orion opened at Kings Island in Mason, Ohio on July 2nd, 2020. This ride, being a Giga coaster made by B&M, is the tallest coaster in the park, standing at an amazing height of 287 feet tall, but it rounds it out with having a 300-foot tall drop at 85 degrees, getting you all the way to the top speed of 91 miles an hour, where you'll traverse just over 1 full mile of track. It gets through this course in about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, with the total prime ride time, that means from the top of the lift all the way to the brake run, being just under a minute. Now that you know the basic stats on this roller coaster, let's figure out how to get there. Orion is pretty easy to see from that amazing front entrance gate, but once you go in, find yourself going all the way down International Street before either taking a left right before the Eiffel Tower or going straight through it. If you take that left-handed path, you'll want to make sure to turn right on the Coney Mall section of the park, and you'll pass by Racer on your left. If you take that more direct route of going straight through the Eiffel Tower, once you get to the park's clock, make a left, and you'll end up going exactly perpendicular to Coney Mall and walking right through it into the brand new area, Area 72. To get into this new area, you'll be walking underneath the Racer at its highest point, and you'll see some of the amazing theming that they were able to sprinkle in throughout as a kind of parody to what we think of Area 51. It even has a car with a conspiracy theorist making a podcast just outside, but as soon as you'll enter that area, you'll see some cool theming, especially with Flight of Fear, its neighboring coaster, and a lot of that militaristic styling. Everything has this beautiful bright pop of blue that just accents so well, especially with that scheme being carried over to the coaster itself, as its entrance will be right in front of you. But if you have a bag or any loose articles, make sure you head to the lockers just to the left of the entrance before getting in line. And if you're at the park all day, I highly recommend getting the all-day locker plan. At least when we went, it was $5 all day. It'll save you quite a few bucks. From this point, you'll enter into the queue, which your first little dose of theming will include an infrared camera looking back at you before you start heading downward using some awkwardly spaced steps, getting to see more and more theming as you walk. This queue, as well as a lot of the ride, is in this miniature valley, so it only makes everything around you seem taller. Following this, you'll start going back and forth through a ton of switchbacks with some light theming and some poster work. Thankfully, there are spray fans, especially for those hot days, although something I do have to mention is there is minimal shade structure for most of this queue. Eventually, if the line is long enough, you'll find yourself going indoors to the most highly themed part of this entire ride, and this one room in particular has so many Easter eggs I can't even begin to cover them all, but I adore how Kings Island was able to tie this ride back into the rest of the park's history. I mean, heck, Area 72 is actually a nod to when the park opened in 1972. But in this room, there is military equipment, blueprints for rides such as Vortex, and a pre-ride pre-show playing on TV screens telling you all about the theme of the ride, which, if you didn't know, you've been selected in this top secret program to try and fend off asteroids from hitting the Earth. At least that's what I think it is. After that cool little bit of theming, you'll end up heading up a staircase into the station, which I will say is probably as bland as most of the rest of the outdoor switchbacks, but it's okay, because while it may be bland, it is very, very clean. With that though, it's just about time to take your seat, so let's do just that. On Orion, there are 8 rows with 4 seats across in each row, and as you mosey on into your seat, you'll find yourself going quite far back into one of the most comfortable coaster seats and restraint arrangements in the industry. The seat is incredibly ergonomic, and even as someone who's 6 foot tall, my feet don't touch the floor. With that though, make sure to buckle up your seatbelt, which I found was really cool at Kings Island. Most of the coasters had the exact same seatbelt with the exception of Mystic Timbers, so that made things a little easier. But soon after that, a ride operator will come over and push your restraint down. Now this restraint is just a lap bar with a pretty big metal pole that goes right in between your legs. Thankfully though, this clamshell style restraint system is just so well form-fitting, at least for me personally. I feel unbelievably secure, but at the same time so free. It just is a perfect pairing for this type of ride. Speaking of which, since we've got the all clear, we're gonna be out of here climbing that 287 foot tall lift hill. Your ride experience on Orion begins immediately. You'll start going up that amazingly tall lift hill, and you'll get one of the best views of the surrounding area as well as the park possible. The only other view in the park that I would say rivals it is of course from the top of the Eiffel Tower or maybe Drop Tower and Windseeker, but I found Orion to give a really unique perspective, especially with the way you're facing, because most of what you can see is the woods. Once you finally get to the top of this ridiculously tall lift hill, and you'll do it in pretty short time because that lift is just so quick, you'll get this absurd view of the 300-foot drop just below you. But I will say this, it feels so much taller than that, and a big reason for that is of course the fact that you're diving into that valley I talked about earlier. And to me, this ride feels even taller than Millennium Force because of that fact. Millennium Force at Cedar Point is just a tiny bit taller. Heading down that 85-degree drop all the way towards the ground though is unbelievable. This is the steepest Giga coaster in the world, and if you don't know what a Giga coaster is, it's a roller coaster featuring a 300-foot tall top height or a 300-foot tall drop, and man, this drop lasts forever. Especially if you're sitting towards the back row, this drop just punches you right out of the seat. It is phenomenal. Easily one of my favorite roller coaster first drops of all time, and I'm not even kidding about that. The way it sustains airtime all the way towards the ground before hitting you with very, very intense positive G's is truly breathtaking. Getting a sustained 3 or 4 seconds of just pure ejector airtime all the way towards the ground as you hit that top speed of 91 miles an hour is just unbelievable. Because even in the front, you'll get some fantastic airtime going down as well. Once you hit the bottom of that valley within the valley, something I noticed every couple of rides, there was a little bit of shakiness right there, so don't be surprised by maybe a bump or two. And on quite a few of my rides, I would find myself graying out in that spot particularly, just because the positive G's were so forceful and so sustained, especially right after that crazy airtime moment. After this, you'll be vaulted back into the skies with this crazy overbank left-hand turn, which just makes it feel like you're soaring through the air. Because of that sustained speed, and especially that height that you reach, this element is just so flowy and wonderful. I adore it. And I will say, if you're on the right-hand side of the train, you'll even get a little bit of airtime. Following this is technically the second drop, and you'll just get to feel that speed for longer and longer before you head back up into another high point on the ride. This is officially the turnaround, but your ride is far from half over. As you reach the apex of this hill, you'll twist to the right nearly 90 degrees, get possibly a tiny bit of airtime, and start to descend, twisting all the way back towards the ground. This moment was another part of the ride where I would find myself graying out quite a few of my times on the coaster before twisting back out to the left, where I gotta say this is my favorite moment of speed on the ride, just because of how long it is in comparison to right after the the first drop and how close to the ground you really are. This leads into what I think is a lot of people's favorite moment on the ride, a speed airtime hill, which just gets you some really quick, fun airtime. This element was consistently fun, and it was followed up by a much bigger floater airtime hill, which I actually found myself liking a bit more. Getting 5, 6, even 7 seconds of sustained floater that high in the air was just so amazing. Although I will say there is a trim brake on this part of the ride, so don't be shocked if you feel a little bit of a slowdown as you get to the apex of that hill. As you make it back on the ground though, you'll start twisting to the right in one of the highlights of this roller coaster for sure, this ampersand helix or turnaround. You'll find yourself twisting upwards toward the sky before coming right back down as you're turning in the same direction, but you'll end up crossing yourself over a couple times, and boy oh boy, the sustained positive G's here definitely left me grayed out quite a few times. It's just 10 to 12 seconds even of sustained positive G's, and I found myself loving this as a precursor to the finale. As soon as the G's start to let off on the left-hand side, the picture will be right there, so make sure to pose for that camera as you find yourself twisting upward and to the left into the most surprising moment on this roller coaster. This quick little ejector airtime hill, which has no right to be that powerful, and I'm sure is some of your guys' favorite moment on the ride. And this is another element where sitting on the right I think is a little bit of an advantage, just because you get a little bit more of a height change, making that airtime seem even more prominent. Following that, you'll get a tiny dose of positive G's, kind of pushing you down into your seat before possibly getting a little bit more floater airtime as you head into that final brake run. Following that, you'll dive down just a little bit, keep getting slowed down as you just think about what occurred, turn around 180 degrees, and you're back on the station. Then you'll be able to hop right out, hop to the right, and step out the station, down the steps into the rest of Area 72, and then in my case, I'd hop right back in line. So it's time for my personal thoughts and my ratings. If it's not obvious, I love this thing. Orion is seriously one of my favorite rides of all time. And no, I'm not kidding, I'm not lying, I'm not pulling your leg. It is just so fun, and for me, the variety of elements that it has, as well as that heightened speed, just make it amazing. Feeling that immense amount of wind on your face while dipping and diving and twisting all over is just phenomenal. And out of the 2 Giga coasters I've been on, I gotta say, they have quickly shot up to the top of my rankings. And all I can think about is having one in California. Oh my goodness, please, somebody do it. With that said though, this ride really excels at delivering on such quality and variable elements that I couldn't help but find something to like about each and every second on this coaster. The first drop, impeccable. That overbank turn, a lot of fun. The turnaround gives you some force. Both airtime hills offer something different from each other. That ampersand is incredibly unique. And of course, the little bits of ejector airtime at the very end is the cherry on top. Although I will say it does feel a little out of place considering how flowy the rest of the ride is. This, outside of maybe Mystic Timbers, was our most ridden ride in our 3 days at Kings Island. Because 1, it was really easy to re-ride over and over again. And 2, we loved it so much. And that was just during the day. Thankfully, we were able to get 2 night rides on this beast. See what I did there? And I gotta say, they are some of the most memorable night rides out there because of this beautiful lighting package that changes color throughout the layout. You'll go from this fresh, bright blue to complete darkness a couple seconds later, and then an even brighter white to nothing but the moonlight. Having the addition of these big LED lights made the ride, of course, 1, more colorful, and 2, even more disorienting, which I adored. I will say this, personally, I prefer the back row during the daytime, but front all the way during night, as of course, because of the lack of sight, it'll feel even quicker than it really is, and that visual of the changing LEDs just makes it one of the best night rides I can think of. This ride is super comfortable, enjoyable, but not exactly for the faint of heart, so it gets those thrill seekers excited. And personally, I adore this thing and wish I could pick it up and move it to somewhere like Knott's Berry Farm. With that wrapped up, let's figure out my least and most favorites of this coaster, which, as you heard me mention in terms of seat a little bit ago, I definitely love the back during the day and of course the front during the night. Honestly, in terms of absolute favorite seats, it's gotta be the back right during the day and the front middle left during the night. I know, very oddly specific, but we were able to ride it that many times in every single row to truly be able to break that down. But you can't really go wrong with any seat on this ride, as there's not too much of a change for most elements between rows. In terms of favorite and least favorite element, let's start with my least favorite element, and this is really tough for me. And as much as I'd not want to say it, I think it's gotta be that turnaround. Don't get me wrong, I think it's still fantastic, but slowing down at the very top of that element does take you out of that sense of speed just for a second there. But moving on to my favorite element, it's gotta be that first drop. Oh my goodness, it's so good. With some honorable mentions, of course, being that ampersand, that final ejector airtime hill, and even that floater hill. So that'll move us to my official ratings. If you haven't seen one of these full in-depth reviews before, I have quite an unorthodox rating system. First, I'll give it a ski slope rating, pretty much recommending how experienced of a coaster rider you should be before taking on this coaster. I'll give a 5-star rating for both intensity and fun, and of course, a score out of 10 for my personal thoughts on the ride. This one is kind of tough for me to nail down in the intensity category, but I think you should be an experienced coaster rider before taking this ride on. And honestly, it might be the last coaster you want to hit up if you're a little more nervous about these gigantic rides. With, of course, the biggest deterrent being that height and speed on this coaster, I would highly recommend riding Diamondback, which is a fairly similar experience, just a little bit shorter, and with a lot more airtime hills. So if you can take on Diamondback, you can take on Orion. And if you can take on Banshee, Orion's a piece of cake. That moves us to our intensity rating, and I'm gonna have to say it's a 4 out of 5 stars. It's not the most intense thing I've ever been on, but again, because of that height and that speed, as well as a lot of those sustained positive Gs, this ride can get pretty dang intense. And of course, this shouldn't be a shock. Out of 5 stars for fun, this is easily a 5. And I think most of you know where this is going for my personal rating. This ride is a 10 out of 10 and expect it up in my top 25, as I would highly recommend any coaster enthusiast out there, make sure you get on it one of these days. With that said though, I'd love to know your thoughts on Orion. Make sure to let me know down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you think Orion's fantastic, or are you on the complete opposite side of things? Let me know. And of course, while you're down there, make sure to go check out all our links in the description, including a poll ranking every single ride at Kings Island, so make sure to go check that out. But of course, I want to say thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I really do appreciate it. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, we've got other Kings Island reviews as well as plenty more reviews coming from our Parks Bros Road Trip 2022. So don't fret, reviews for The Voyage, Lightning Run, and so much more are on their way. With that all tied in a bow, I wanted to say thank you again so much for watching, and of course, until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.